Ah, such lovely snow. The cold white morning and a delicious cup of hot mocha. It's winter, that time to reflect on the past year. Not to mention spend some time with the family. So happy holidays to all of you, whatever you might celebrate. I hope you are having a lovely season. Now, with the pleasantries out of the way, let's take a closer look at that hole in Hebra Mountain. What caused it, and why it even matters. I'm Cornelius Belmont, and let's talk about the Hebra Mountain mystery. Thanks for joining me. If you want to see similar content like this, please like and subscribe to the channel. Special thank you to these people for letting me use their assets. Spoilers ahead for the following games. Let's get into it. Hebra Mountain is a new addition to the series, first appearing in Breath of the Wild. It houses the second highest peak in the kingdom, with only Death Mountain being taller. The temperatures of Hebra are cold, with its icy winds flowing into the valley below where the Rito live. It is clear that the region has been within Hyrule's borders since the time of the ancient calamity. We can tell that because Shekiah's shrines are built all over it. Looking around on the mountain, we can see that it has largely been undisturbed since those ancient times. It is a peaceful location, dangerous to travelers due to the extreme weather, with a hidden hot spring concealed within its peaks. There is even a small settlement tucked away in it that has unfortunately been abandoned since the events of the calamity 100 years earlier. Of course, the most striking feature of the mountain is at its peak. A perfect hole has been pierced through it by some unknown means. That hole is the goal of today's investigation. With that said, let's examine it a bit more closely. Originally, I had thought that this hole might be a scar on the land from the calamity 100 years earlier, but upon closer inspection, it seems that the hole is far older. As I'm sure many of you are aware, the peak of the mountain has a Shekiah shrine hidden inside of it, and we know that all of those shrines were built over 10,000 years ago. If the hole was younger, then that would imply whatever mechanism was used to reveal the shrine has been lost to time. However the shrine was meant to be accessed really isn't important here. The geological impact as a result of blowing a hole in the mountain, though, that is concerning. At least it normally would be, but upon closer inspection, we can see that the rock here is very unusual. Looking at the hole itself, we can see that there is a strange substance here. A type of rock, or maybe crystal, that Link is unable to climb. That in itself says something, because Link can basically climb any surface in the game, including blocks of ice. Of course, Cryonis blocks might be an exception here, as that technology might purposely create ice that is grippable. But I digress. The simple fact is that there was a choice on part of the developers to make it so Link is unable to climb the substance we see in the Hebra hole. If we delve deeper into the mountain, we can find at least one spot that has been hollowed out by an underground lake, specifically the spot housing the Hebra skeleton. Here, the walls are climbable and don't have that glass-like appearance that we see from the rock at the peak. Considering that there is ice blocking the entrance to the shrine, and that you are expected to melt it in order to get through, I am inclined to say that the rocky substance is not ice. Which then begs the question, what is it? Well, I'm getting to that. But given the property that Link is unable to climb it is really important. As for what made the hole, well, let's speculate on that next. I think the intent the developers were going for, and what I've personally thought for a long time, is that the hole in the mountain is a scar from battle. We see Guardian lasers a lot in the game, and they are some of the most destructive things we have seen in the game series so far. When I started thinking up this theory, I originally thought that the hole may have happened 100 years earlier during the events of the Calamity. that perhaps a corrupted Vah-Ruta fired its beam at the mountain. Having determined that the beam came from someplace close to the Nekluda region, just a little south of the dueling peaks, it would make sense that Ruta had been called to the area perhaps to defend Dea village. The more I looked into that idea, though, the more I ruled it out. You see, at the end of the game, we get to see just how powerful these Divine Beast weapons really are. And quite simply, a blast from them isn't nearly as large as the hole that we see in the mountain. Furthermore, there is a question of just how destructive these weapons are. Because there is a bit of dissonance on the topic due to the environment in the game simply not being destructible. It doesn't matter how many times I trick this Guardian into shooting Robbie's front door, the door or building isn't going to break. This is called story and gameplay segregation, in which what we see happens in the story doesn't track with what we see in our gameplay experience. It's often a problem when we see a character being absolutely amazing in a cutscene, taking out whoever in a single hit. But then when you actually control the character, you end up wailing on their life bar for 10 minutes. In this case, a Guardian laser and other weapons would clearly be able to destroy objects, light stuff on fire, and ruin the environment. And yet the developers didn't allow that to happen outside of a few specific spots. As such, if we look at Age of Calamity, and the missions where we are able to control Divine Beast in it, we can do things like rake their beams along the side of a mountain, and simply not put holes in them at all. Worse yet, we can't even damage the grass. And so we have to take the idea that these weapons are not able to affect the environment with a heavy grain of salt. Even still, I can't help but to feel that the hole in the mountain was meant to reflect a huge beam firing through it. So let's go a little deeper. If a single beam couldn't do it or wasn't big enough, how about 4 of them united at once? At the end of the game, we see each of the Divine Beasts shoot off their beams and collide together in the throne room of Hyrule Castle. From there, they combine together into a single force that then flows downward into the Astral Observatory to rain destruction upon the Calamity Ganon. Where previously I had mentioned that a single beam from a Divine Beast wouldn't be large enough to accommodate the size of the hole we see in Hebra, could 4 beams merging together into a single larger one do the job? They might be able to, though I would wonder what the point of such an action would be. Could this have been the Shekiah testing the power of their technology 10,000 years earlier? Perhaps using Hebra as a test site due to its secluded location. If so, could this be the point in which the royal family began to fear the technology, which would later have them ordering the Shekiah to give it up? Perhaps the Calamity did the deed itself once light cannons were in control of the weapons. We simply do not know. But I would like to think that such a blast could have this type of destructive impact on the environment. Again, the hole really gives the impression that it was shot with a massive laser. I have, however, prepared another potential solution to this puzzle, and it relates back to my earlier line about Link being unable to climb the rock in this location. Whatever the rock in Hebra is, it is clearly durable. More importantly, it is smooth and cannot be climbed. At least not by our charming protagonist, that is. Looking at the exact edge of the material on the mountain, we can see how Link is able to grip the normal rock on the top layer, but as soon as he climbs onto this material, he loses his grip and falls. And as I talked about earlier, the deeper parts of the mountain seem to be made up of normal rock and not this substance. So with that distinct property in mind, I asked the question, where else have we seen things that our hero has been unable to climb? The answer is the Shekiah structures we spend so much time playing in. One of the complaints about the game, especially early into its release, was that Link is simply unable to climb certain structures, all of which were created by the Shekiah. I am not saying that the material we see of the Shekiah structures is made of this substance. That would be far too much to account for given the size of the hole. We would be talking about all the shrine entrances, the 5 massive pillars around the castle, and of course the 4 divine beasts themselves. There simply isn't enough of this material, at least from this one hole. However, perhaps they were able to break down the substance and make a coating out of it, something that could fend off decay for thousands of years. It would explain how this technology is still working after so long. Even still, it is a bit of a stretch that a hole even this massive could supply a coating for every Shekiah structure we see in the game. Some of those shrine puzzles are massive, I would remind you. Fans of my channel may recall that I raised speculation in the past video as to if the Shekiah shrine trials were even real. In it, I raised criticism based on their size, and how unstable it would make the land if there really were such huge chasms dug underground. I'll link to that video in the description. But I'll just say that I play with the idea that the shrines are merely putting Link into a mental simulation where he is playing out the puzzles the monk created. There is some pretty good evidence for that if we look at the Trial of the Sword DLC, not to mention the mental trials that the champions put Link through in the Ballad of the Hero DLC. I mean, really? Are you going to tell me that these biodegradable leaves and wood would survive 10,000 years? Anyhow, the important part is, if we look at the hole in the mountain, and think about how much of the substance would be needed in order to coat the Shekiah surfaces we see in the world, it seems feasible that the ore refinement from this part of the mountain could have been used for that purpose. And so I am suggesting that the hole in Hebra Mountain is not a scar of war, but rather a scar of industrialization. Mining resources from the land is nothing new in Hyrule. The idea of stripping a mountaintop of resources to build something with it is something that we see happen in the game with the Gerudo, as it is clear that they are mining the top of the Gerudo Highlands for stone in order to build their structures, such as the 8 heroine statues. We also see that the Gorons are mining and using ore for their various things, sometimes even food. My point being, it looks to me that the Hylians were mining Hebra for this ore. It's not hard to imagine that they could have been using things like an early version of the Divine Beast weapons to shoot the mountain with controlled burst, and then collect whatever was destroyed or melted in the process. Perhaps such a show of power is the thing that scared the royal family, and contributed to the later ban on their technology after the calamity had been dealt with. In all likelihood, the answer to this mystery will never be revealed by Nintendo. It is entirely possible that they never put any thought into this other than to make a surface Link cannot climb, and a mysterious hole in the mountain that never intended to provide a real story. At the same time, as a theorist, I speculate on what I see and draw conclusions based on stated evidence. In this case, I think that I've come up with a rather interesting explanation for something that is visible from most of the world map. It may not be as spectacular as a glowing castle, or some flying machine in the distance, but the hole in Hebra Mountain is something that caught my attention. And this is just a theory after all. Now that I've laid that all out, I am curious to hear what you think caused this hole. Is it from the Divine Beast? Maybe a huge stone talus came crashing into it from space. A stone talus made from this substance. Now that would be interesting to see. Anyhow, leave your comments below. Now I'm off to work on next week's episode of Judgment Time. It's gonna be a good one, so stay tuned, and thanks for watching the video.